Not what.
How to adjust your television set? You are fortunate enough to have tuned in to 30 frames a second.
You have spun that into the fact where the victim is now the perpetrator and the perpetrator is now the victim. And that just drives me crazy.
10 in the morning, bright and early. We're so grateful that you could join us for a panel on the UN occupation of Haiti. And we have different aspects that we will present on that. Myself, my name is Pajani Fleury. I'm a publisher and very active in the Haitian community for many years. On my right here is Ray Lafroy. I said that in my best Creole Haitian accent, yes. And Kim Ives as well is presenting on this very important topic. As a publisher and community organizer, I've found a way to reach the masses on many different levels. And so I have 3 publications, one of which does deal with Haiti. It's called Keskia Magazine. So we do a lot of culture and arts, bringing in the masses, right? We have these type of forums here, but of course, not everyone can fit into these small classrooms and be with us. So we always make sure that we have different ways of reaching people. So on my left here is my husband, stage name Ari. His name is Joshua. And it is a name that he chose under our way of life, our belief system. We are Hebrew Israelites, and we take our message to different parts of the community and the world. So he's going to do a piece for you today. It's entitled Mocha, and it speaks to what I'm going to be specifically presenting on, which is the prostitution that happened under the UN occupation, the MUNISTA mission of Haiti. There has been a lot of reports, kind of rumors, and now as the 63rd session of the UN General Assembly, there has been concrete information provided about UN peacekeepers' involvement with prostitution in Haiti. So with that, I'm going to leave it up to Ari to provide a musical piece in reference to the problem of prostitution and sex trafficking that goes on globally.
This goes out to the young, beautiful black girls, the ones that's trying to make it in this cruel world. So she get her shorts cut short, tight mini skirts and drop curls. Tall or short, stay in the gym so she gets no rolls. Don't want to walk so she recline and roll. Don't mess with dudes unless they money in rolls. And every weekend she on that dance floor, she's getting low. Sex is unprotected, continuing the cycle, now she's pregnant with that baby girl. She still got them drop curls, but now she got low self-esteem. So she roll up in steam, drink mad liquor. Swinging on poles, her stage name Mocha. Scared to come up short, she thinking those pimps gon' shoot her. Tell me, have y'all seen her? They all around this globe. Perm or fro, it's hard for these young black girls to grow in a system that want them to be hoes, so they mimic these video hoes only if they know they worth. Young mothers, sisters, and daughters, do you know your worth? Woman, carry the seed for 9 months and then give birth. Beautiful black woman, please know your worth.
However, these are things that women in Haiti are experiencing. You know, here, the problem is not as, let's just use the word outrageous, right? Because we have a judicial system and a lot of people pay for those crimes. But in Haiti, and especially the UN peacekeepers are protected under that cloak. There are many men and women in position of power who exploit women and girls, and particularly in vulnerable situations such as Haiti, where food and resources are hard to come by. There's lack of jobs, lack of proper infrastructure. So when you're dealing with a vulnerable community like that, and an institution comes in that's supposed to protect and serve, this is one of the biggest crimes against humanity that a population can face. Because if the women that are the nurturers of a country, of a nation, and the children who are the future are not protected and they're being exploited, the country doesn't stand a chance. The women are the nurturers, and as Ari said, the womb is so important. And if the government and the people in power are not focused on protecting the womb of their country, it is setting up a generations to come for failure. And the government, the recent government, I feel, failed the next, even 100 generations, because these women and girls that came up to speak about the what they've experienced under the UN peacekeepers' exploitation, many of them experienced the exploitation as young as 9 years old. They were not fully developed, developed at all, and the UN peacekeepers had a big hand in the rise in prostitution. This is documented at the 63rd General Assembly. You can research it, you can pull up the information. All these things are held in a database of the UN. You can go online and search for the 63rd session of the General Assembly at the UN, and Haiti presented on the rise of prostitution from the time Haiti was occupied by UN peacekeepers. And they have been brought up on charges, however, none of them have been prosecuted. None of the UN peacekeepers, and they've been called by name, they have been outed. Many of them came from India, Nepal, and Brazil. And Brazil has a big problem now because their whole reason for sending so many troops to be a part of this UN mission was to secure themselves a position on the UN Security Council. They want to seem strong on, national security and addressing humanitarian issues around the world. So they thought this was the perfect project. However, many of these Brazilian troops have been called out by name for running prostitution rings in Haiti. So when you look at how far back reports of prostitution and sex exploitation, sex trafficking in relation to UN peacekeepers, so many things could have been done. Because the first reports came out in 1999. In August 1999, it was presented in the UN in relation to Mozambique. So this problem is not just in Haiti, is not just because of Haiti's lack of infrastructure and many other issues that where it's an isolated problem. This is a UN problem. This is a problem of them recruiting pedophiles and people who did come from shady backgrounds that are recruited into these missions to quote unquote serve and protect. And they're not doing that at all. They are a part of the global system to exploit people who are vulnerable. And the government of Haiti, although they did present this information, concrete information, research had been done, proving all of these crimes of exploitation that happen, and not one person has been prosecuted or served time in jail. None of these individuals paid for these crimes. And I would like to see more done by the Haitian government to hold foreign entities accountable that come into the country and do more harm than good, and also for the global community to do more to protect women and girls.
Myself, I'm Kim Ives. I'm one of the editors and writers at Haiti Liberté newspaper, the largest Haitian weekly. And we have on the cover this week, La classe ouvrière résiste, exige mais négocie. There's now a workers' uprising in Haiti, which Ray will talk about shortly. But this is really the result of, I could say, a 2-decade war against the Haitian people carried out by the U.S. empire. Some decades ago, shortly after the first U.S. occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934, under the doctrine of the good neighbor policy put in place by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, there was a model set in place where essentially U.S. troops would go in to a country, set up the army, and then leave the local army as a proxy. This was the scenario we saw in Haiti, where they set up the Garde d'Haïti. It was the same in Nicaragua, in the Dominican Republic, and Guatemala, other countries, Cuba, where essentially the armies became the defenders of the neocolonial power. And the dictators who ran the armies were sons of bitches, but as FDR said of Somoza, he's a son of a bitch, but he's our son of a bitch. So this worked for a few decades, but the problem was it created many revolutions, many Che Guevaras. They started to have revolutions everywhere. And this is where the empire, which is always analyzing these problems, came with a new paradigm. And that paradigm was the international peacekeeping force. This is, we will use people of the same world, the third world, to police themselves, much the same way we see the brownification of the U.S. police forces, especially after events like the Abner Louima torture or the Patrick Dorisma killing about a decade and a half ago here in New York, where many more black police officers were recruited in. So now, instead of having U.S. Marines do the policing and the monitoring of these nations with proxy forces, they use Brazilians or Sri Lankans or Pakistanis or Argentinians. And I have a number of differences with Noam Chomsky, who I traveled next month will be 24 years ago to Haiti with, and we had a long talk going down on the plane about the UN. And he said the UN has always been a simple arm of US policy. He said from the Korean War on, it has always been this role, and it's never been different. And to delude ourselves that it is some sort of international neutral body is a big mistake. And while I'm on that, before I even go to the next point, I'm going to make a plug for a book that I think you should all try to find, if you can. It's called The Great Haiti Humanitarian Aid Swindle. And this is done by a statistical anthropologist by the name of Timothy Schwartz. This is a numbers guy who doesn't have any particular ideological dog in the fight, but he does give primacy to numbers. He came to some sort of renown when about 2 years after the earthquake, he said it wasn't 312 people who died in the earthquake. It was between 312,000 people who died in the earthquake. It was between 44 and 66,000. And he did this through statistical methodology, which he laid out, but showing that the 312,000 number that had been put out there was completely picked out of thin air. In any case, he's written a wonderful book which explodes so many of the myths about Haiti in terms of its criminality, in terms of its violence, etc., which people who have worked or lived in Haiti know can be blown completely out of proportion by the mainstream press. But one of his particular targets in a chapter that I just finished, and I haven't finished the book, but it's excellent reading, a real page-turner, is about that hallowed, sacrosanct agency of the UN known as UNICEF. I mean, who could have an issue with UNICEF? We all collected trick-or-treating, the little UNICEF boxes when we would go around on Halloween, at least I did years ago. And, but UNICEF, for one, is one of the huge beneficiaries of this UN occupation of Haiti. They are the agency which had contributed in large measure to what was supposedly the orphan crisis after the earthquake. They claimed that there were as many as 1 million orphans after the earthquake, which was an absurd number when there were perhaps no more than 100, according to his statistical breakdown and investigation into the matter. But they came up with the notion of orphans as being any child who had lost one parent. So you might have another parent, but if you just have one parent, you can be dubbed an orphan, and hence you have this whole orphanage industry, and it's a very fascinating story that he puts in the book about the struggle that grew between Save the Children and UNICEF on the one hand versus the evangelical orphanages which came to be set up as some sort of fishing ground looking for children which could then be given to evangelical parents in the state and raised as good Christians, et cetera, et cetera. Fascinating, but also looking at it in Haitian culture, how in fact many poor families want their child to be adopted to be able to go to the States and send money back, et cetera. In any case, that's just a slight detour as we talk about the UN role in Haiti. So this new paradigm change, and the international peacekeeping force has now become the new way to monitor the neo-colonies. And the first step is to get rid of the dictators, as was done about 30 years ago. Duvalier, Somoza, Marcos in the Philippines, Pinochet, et cetera. They were shown the door, and we brought in what Edward Herman called, through demonstration elections, these civilian heads of state who were elected the same way they're elected here. The candidate with the most money wins, usually. And they would be backed by this international peacekeeping force if there was trouble that came up in the course of their time in power. Now, in Haiti, this happened fairly quickly because they elected the wrong president. They were supposed to, in 1990, elect a World Bank functionary, Marc Bazin, who was well-funded through the National Endowment for Democracy. He had a war chest of about $36 million. And Jean-Bertrand Aristide, a poor parish priest, came up against him. He had a war chest of about $500,000, so that's a differential of about 72 to 1. But out of a field of 16 candidates, Aristide won handily with 67% of the vote when they stopped counting, because it probably would have been more. He was not what Washington had wanted, and the government of George H.W. Bush worked behind the scenes with the Haitian elite, which has a sort of a comprador bourgeois element and a big landowning element. And they brought about a coup d'etat. And that coup d'etat continued for 3 years. The resistance went unabated, and it in fact grew because it was a very stark example of a popularly elected government overthrown by these military dictators. It was very bloody. And eventually, Bill Clinton had come into power by 1992. He was elected. And it was clear the problem wasn't going away, so he said, okay, we're going to try something new, and they brought Aristide back on the shoulders of 20,000 U.S. troops. But those troops only stayed there until March of 1995, and that was when the first UN, when I say stayed there, they militarily occupied the country, and they stayed there until the UN peacekeepers, quote unquote, took over in 1995. Now, with any military occupation, and this has been true since the time of the Romans, you are going to have terrible crimes. Prostitution is one. Fatherless children are left in many towns and cities where thousands of young men of various nationalities couple up with Haitian women and leave the kids behind having promised whatever they've promised. And that's just the beginning, okay, because there are massacres, there are rapes, there are many other crimes of power which are committed by these troops. And by 2000, that first UN occupation had been phased out, and Aristide was again elected in 2000. Unfortunately for him, that was also the year George W. Bush came to power, and they had it out for him. They had 3 targets: Haiti, Venezuela, and Cuba. And as Noriega, who was the Secretary of State for the Western Hemisphere, said Haiti was the low-hanging fruit. That was the easy one. Venezuela was a little harder, and Cuba was the tough nut. Well, we know that the Venezuelan coup did not succeed. It was turned back by the people in alliance with the army. But in Haiti, they did succeed in ousting Aristide for a second time in 2004. He was whisked out of the country, taken to Africa. Briefly, he was in Jamaica. He spent 7 years in exile in Africa. During that time, a UN peacekeeping force in June 2004 was brought into Haiti to take over from the American, the U.S., French, and Canadian forces which occupied the country from March 1st, 2004 until June 1st, 2004. And this UN occupation was supposed to last for 6 months. 6 months was what they were talking. But it is now still ongoing today in 2017, 13 years later. Now, the reason for the title of this particular workshop, The Shell Game, is that they've once again, through compliant media and through very little critical thinking, as again Tim Schwartz points out in all the myths perpetrated about Haiti, have convinced people that the occupation is over. But it is not over. The occupation has been made, the military occupation of Haiti, which, by the way, is the only country in the Western Hemisphere to endure foreign military occupation. Most of the others are in Africa and Asia. The occupation has had upwards of 11,000 to 12,000 members during the earthquake. It is now at about 3,000 and drawing down, and by October it is supposed to be finished what is called the UN Mission to Stabilize Haiti, MINUSTA. That is the force that came in 2004. But this force is made up not just of soldiers, but of police officers as well, men and women who carry guns, who are foreign troops, essentially. And the Haitian Constitution is extremely explicit about this matter. It says there can be no armed force in Haiti other than the police and the Haitian army. There can be no other armed force on Haitian territory. So it's a flagrant violation of the Haitian Constitution. And furthermore, it is a violation of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which states specifically that troops are to be used in cases of international conflict, not for domestic internal affairs. And this is what has happened in Haiti. They have essentially inserted troops in to handle an internal conflict. Now, this has great importance because Haiti is often the test case, just as during that first occupation from 1915 to 1934, they pioneered techniques like aerial bombings. That was when the airplane was beginning to be used as a weapon, strategic hamlets, many things we saw in Vietnam. We now see, Ray and I just last night were at an emergency meeting that the Venezuelan ambassador here to the UN called up at the Venezuelan embassy because there is a coup d'etat underway, as I'm sure all of you know, in Venezuela. And he explained to us that in the UN, they are trying to bring before the Security Council the case of Venezuela, to say we need to bring in troops, we need foreign intervention, the situation is out of hand, the people are starving, et cetera, et cetera. And again, the precedent that they're using for this is Haiti. He's explained that they've been able, with their allies, to beat back these attempts. But the OAS is another matter. The OAS, which Cuba calls Washington's Ministry for Colonial Affairs, the Secretary General of it, Luis Almagro, has made the Venezuelan crisis his whipping boy. He has constantly been out trying to bring sessions of the OAS to the point where Venezuela has now had to withdraw from the OAS because of his flagrant meddling on the behalf of Washington. So this is where, just to return now to the MINUSTA question, MINUSTA has supposedly been trumpeted to be withdrawing its troops on October 15th this year, and that will be the end of the occupation. But it is being replaced by another mission called the MINUJUST, the UN Mission for Justice in Haiti. And this is made up of 1,300, of almost 1,400 police officers, which are, in essence, the same force. But it is the thin edge of the wedge. But the fact that they can keep these foreign officers in there, and what is their mission? In an April 14th session at the UN, or maybe it was April 11th, just shortly before the last 6-month renewal on April 15th, the head of MINUSTA said their mission of MINUJUST will be to supervise and monitor governance and elections in Haiti. That is, they are going to be the umpires, the overseers of Haitian democracy, quote unquote. The same nation which has the well-known anomaly of the Electoral College. We don't have direct democracy in this country, as we know. We have an Electoral College. And in fact, this was a point I brought up with Orlando Marville in a Voice of America interview back in 2004 when they were criticizing Haitian elections, and they used that very argument of the election calculation was not correct and therefore the OAS needs to intervene. And I said, well, then the OAS should be intervening in the U.S. because you have an electoral college and many people don't agree with the results that gives. So, so here is the dilemma. We have a press which is uncritically repeating the fallacy that the UN occupation of Haiti is over, when in fact we have still over 1,000 UN troops in the form of police officers still going to be stationed in Haiti indefinitely after October 15th. So I think we can talk more afterwards. I want to leave time for Ray to talk about the uprisings that are happening in Haiti, which is the very reason why those UN troops are there. But we do have to understand that Haiti is once again being used as a sort of a template for the type of domination that the empire wants to bring to the entire hemisphere.
We, as Kim mentioned, particularly as the Second World War was approaching, the U.S., I guess to some extent needed the troops to be fighting Germany and Italian fascism. Also, it was an experimentation with a new stable reality. So, as he was saying, people like Batista or Castro was kind of half tolerated a little bit, thinking they could control him, and dictatorship that we saw all over the place, as in Brazil, Argentina, those guerrillas, as I used to call them. Trujillo was actually assassinated. And so they were trying a new formula. And that formula was the magic tool of election, which works very well for us here. And so what it does, it gives people the illusion. People commit all their resources, their energies, into a process that eventually is set up to fail. It's set up to deny them willpower. And therefore accept the result. And also in the process, people get compensated, become, like in the case of Haiti, people become professional politicians. And that's a source of income for them, their friends, and the family. And then, of course, there's corruption within that. So we saw the strong hand of U.S. military president, dictatorship, imposing American ways, and it was way before, by the way. Haiti was invaded in 1915. That was before the Russian Revolution. And was it? Well, yes.
For the Haitian
Revolution.
Oh, the Russian.
I mean,
yes,
the Russian
it was
Revolution,
the
yes.
Russian, yes. 1970.
So that excuse could have been used at that particular point. So they created what they call, very unfairly, Banana Republic, which doesn't define who those people are, but what you have reduced them to be, which is just as a practical effect of having people producing things for you, just for your own consumption, that your own companies benefit and control directly, economically, control salaries, and indirectly create forces that affect and control the political reality there. Work hand in hand with the military. But this blunt instrument, as Kim explained, resulted in tremendous upheaval. 1954, Arbenz takes power in Guatemala and gets killed, finally overthrown and killed when he finally decides that the oil of Guatemala, which is the primary resources, should actually belong to the people and government of Guatemala. It's like somebody says, it's not our oil, and then it's those people's land somehow. So the system then is withdrawn with figurehead, so-called more democratic, the electoral process being used. But again, this is an altered version of what is essentially an exploitative system. And since you cannot actually have slavery and actually make the slave happy about the situation, the system by nature is unstable. So then we start seeing, in spite of what happened to our bands, this process continues. We have revolt in Venezuela, uprising. Castro happens, of course, in Cuba. And then we have the first attempt being Kennedy's Alliance for Progress, which is a fig leaf, not only that, it's a Band-Aid on a real gaping wound. And also, both the Cuban example and relentless organizing toward those countries result in creation of movements that later give you the Nicaraguan Revolution, El Salvador's FMLN. So the monster from the U.S. perspective reappears, and they have to find a way to deal with it. And the way that we see it was in the Reagan, pretty much was brute force. We had the Contras assassinating the people of Nicaragua. In El Salvador, the U.S. used a weapon called in Vietnam the Puff, the Magic Dragon. So named because it is, those new Gatling guns that can pepper a football field, within every 6 inches of each other, there will be a bullet set up. Weapons like that were used in essentially an agrarian society. Sometimes bombs were being dropped on their camp, and they couldn't even see the plane. Sometimes maybe there were B-52s. This is a level of technology that was used to destroy and roll back those movements for not just resistance, but active change. At that point, Haiti was still dealing with the ends, the new version of Duvalier dictatorship, and they saw something. Duvalier died that gave them an opening. Two branches that of the Haitian upper class that Kim defined. One of the comprador, which tends to be mostly the heir to the mulatto class that took over after the revolution, and some of the people, the quote-unquote blacks in Haiti, were generals who became huge landowners and those people were fighting supposedly over skin color, but both sides were actually screwing the Haitian people the best way they could. So with Papa Doc dead, and Baby Doc throwing his eyes on some women from the traditional bourgeoisie, the U.S. saw a unique opportunity of bringing those two groups together. And it worked to some extent, so that the business of exploiting the Haitian people and sucking his blood, as they've done sometimes literally, particularly in the Papa Doc, I saw a cartoonish thing the other day. There was a infamous guy named Cambron in Haiti, and his business was actually people who had not even eaten for 5, 6, 10 days would come and give their blood. And so that blood, without being properly tested, the serum would be taken and shipped all over the place, including this country. A kind of a Dracula, ghoulish aspect to this. So that the brutish militaristic approach that Duvalier had is being withdrawn. The army is still there. Maybe they'll create something called what was that group again? I forget its name.
The
now.
Leopards?
The Leopards. Just completely misnomer. Nothing really scary. But anyway, they were armed and the Haitian people were not. And but the system is still too much of what it is. I mean, you cannot overnight change because the motivation of people taking part in that system, first, these are the same elements. The motivations are the same. It's just that the leopard, speaking of that, is trying to change the spots of that leopard. And so eventually, at the end of Papa Doc, well, not quite the end, the left was physically eliminated, particularly in 1969, and there was a vacuum created within which elements were somewhat protected by the Church of Rome, of which Aristide was part of, the so-called theology of liberation, were able to expand and represented and express the desires of Haitian masses for a modicum of social justice and an end to violence and corruption. So the result was Aristide. So Aristide was a spoiler. Because the election was finally going to give you the illusion that, again, as someone said, you participated in this, you get involved all the time. It's 2 years, during an election, like they do to us here, and then you do nothing else but that. You attack somebody against whom you really have no particular disagreement, fundamental disagreement. And eventually somebody wins and everybody lines up and either suffers the consequences or try to get the most out of it by being part of the system. And so Aristide was a spoiler. But when it became clear that even though basically